They claim that Back 4 Blood is the spiritual successor to the Left 4 Dead series. Well, it is in the same way that Force Awakens was to A New Hope, a shadow of its former self. Take the original idea, rebrand it, leave out half of what made it work, and cash in on the nostalgia. The fact is, this game's kinda boring. Now, what I've been playing is a beta, so I'm not going to discuss the bugs here because most of these should have been solved by release. This video is going to focus on gameplay, what little story there is, and well, there will be a lot of comparisons with Left 4 Dead because that's exactly what this game is trying and failing to be. So, this can't follow my usual reviews. We need more categories. Let's start with game aesthetics. The environments we are seeing so far are incredibly generic. There is nothing exciting about them. And maybe that's an issue with the Unreal Engine 4, that everything in it looks the same. I'm not sure. But nothing excited me about the environments I was seeing. At no point in the game do I feel scared. There is a constant stream of trash mobs, there are no breaks in combat unless you have tools to unlock a secret room that happens to be stocking an entire armory, and for a few moments you can hide in there in peace. But this lack of a break in combat means you don't ever fear suddenly getting jumped by a special, or a sudden horde. You're always just ready for combat, you are never caught off guard. And since it's related to the aesthetic, what is with the weapon crates everywhere? I'm fairly sure I did not boot up Warzone. There are a constant stream of orange crates on the ground holding all kinds of weapons. In Left 4 Dead you felt more like you were scrounging for guns left on the ground. Granted, even that was a little bit silly at times. But for the most part you would find weapons in gun racks, in police stations and things like that. It just made sense, that attention to detail worked. And in a similar vein, the other thing that Left 4 Dead did better was that trash mobs looked different. They had different outfits on depending on the area they were in, be that a police uniform, a doctor's outfit in the hospital, you know, the list goes on. And that translated into the maps themselves. There was a bigger variety, they were much more interesting, there was more to them, there were more little details added. In Back 4 Blood, everything just looks generic. The mobs look generic, the specials look generic, the areas look generic. There's nothing standing out as this is different, this is exciting, this is new. And as I'm recording this, it's just kind of hit me that the whole thing is just a blurry brown-grey mess with a couple of highlights of red now and then, which isn't a very pleasant aesthetic. But let's move on to weapons and combat. So don't get me wrong, as a first-person shooter, it's fine. But that's all it is, it's fine. There is nothing special about it. Play any modern FPS and you will get the same general gameplay. It does it well. It doesn't do it badly, but it doesn't do anything special. However, in Back 4 Blood, there are some rather frustrating elements to this weapon system. For example, all the weapons are pretty much exactly the same, in the sense that they are all generically good at everything. Even the auto shotty is stupidly good at range because of how accurate it is. And then the weapons themselves are only actually as good as the attachments you can put on them. And there does not seem to be a way to switch them to other guns when you pick other guns up. So once you kit out a gun, there's little point or incentive to switch it. I tried various weapons while playing the game, and the conclusion I came to was simply, for the most part, they're all very similar. What matters is having the best attachments possible. There are quite a lot of weapons in the game, but honestly, less would be more here. I honestly can't figure out the purpose in this type of game of having so many different types of SMGs, assault rifles and machine guns. You know, it's different in a game like Warzone where the stats make a huge difference to how you play, your playstyle. That doesn't really matter here. You're shooting zombies or ridden, whatever you want to call them. And then in a stark contrast to that in Left 4 Dead, weapons at least felt like they served a different purpose. Shotguns were great for incoming hordes at close range, but useless at long range. Snipers great for taking out specials at range. Assault rifles good for everything in between, and SMGs were good for clearing out the trash close up. So there was a reason for people to have different weapons on the team. But really in Back 4 Blood, the only mechanic that I can see that is encouraging your team to have different weapon types is the fact that different weapons now use different ammo. So all having a rifle would mean a lack of ammo during the level. Though that said, you can purchase all the ammo you need in the safe room at the start of the next area, along with any other items you might possibly need in the level, from permanent team boosts, to guns, to attachments, to all manner of explosives, healing items, and even toolkits to unlock doors or crates. I understand you're technically supposed to be an expert team going in to clean up an area or complete a mission, but would there really be these ready-made armories at multiple stages in the mission? There's just no scarcity of resources as a result. So the aspect of scarcity from Left 4 Dead is pretty much gone here. So the other thing that's gone from Left 4 Dead is shove. You used to be able to shove the enemies in an arc in front of you back, which allowed you some time to retreat, recuperate, and shoot them. You know, just those few seconds made a huge difference. And that's been replaced by a single target melee attack, which, if you have the right card, gets upgraded to you stabbing them with a knife. But it's still only attacking one enemy at a time. Basically, it's removed the capacity for crowd control. But that brings me nicely onto the other forms of crowd control that do remain, and they're things like the pipe bomb and the Molotov cocktail. However, they're not as exciting to use and watch as they were in Left 4 Dead. There is a major lack of gore in Back 4 Blood. Don't get me wrong, there is an excessive amount of blood splatter, and in fact your character can get so covered in blood it frankly looks stupid. Another case of less is more for this game. But what I'm talking about is the pipe bomb blowing up a mass group of trash mobs. And in Back 4 Blood, it just looks kind of meh. There was much more blood, there was much more bits and pieces flying about in the Left 4 Dead games. And the flames of a Molotov cocktail? Well, they could look a lot better in 2021. And the mobs just kind of wobble about and keel over in it. At least in Left 4 Dead, the zombies charged through the fire and continued running and then dropped dead somewhere on the other side. The flames didn't just stop them like they'd stood in a load of glue. Let's move on to having a chat about the specials. Now, apparently there will be more variants in the final game, but honestly what we got in the beta were lackluster at best. First example being the variant of the Stinger, the Hocker. These 4-armed agile enemies have a projectile attack that can pin you in location, at which point your character just kind of wiggles or wobbles on the spot. It's nowhere near as exciting or scary as being hooked by a smoker in Left 4 Dead. Their version of the Boomer crossed with a Spitter, the Reeker, or the Exploder Wretch variants looks much more like it's going to be a tank than a Boomer. And then there is the Tall Boy with the Crusher and Bruiser variants, the Mob with a single very large bulky arm, and the jokes about him spending too much time alone in his room will just never stop. Heck, the Crusher variant even picks up the player and shakes them in the air. The one other special we got in the beta was the Ogre, which is basically their version of a tank, but massive. A mini boss with a lot of health. It moves rather slowly, so actually seemed to pose less of a threat than a tank, unless you got backed into a corner. And I don't know what's causing it and whether it's an AI issue, but so far the specials in Left 4 Dead just seem a lot smarter. Especially the ones like the Hunter and Smoker and their ability to pick someone off from the pack while they're alone. That seems really rare in Back 4 Blood. And my other issue with the specials in Back 4 Blood is they just fail to stand out. They were much more obvious in the Left 4 Dead games, not just because of the sound cues which are missing here, but you also have the fact that in Back 4 Blood all the specials not only look similar, but some of them are even different variants of the same type. And rather than them being new specials with a new model, they just seem kind of copy-pasted with a few little design changes to that model. I mean, some people might call that lazy. I mean, I will grant you that they're pretty much the same, the only difference being that each one has a different additional or special attack. But you could have just made them a new special with that attack. So, you know, there was more variety, and make them actually look different, have slightly different colouring, do something. They just all look like a brown mess. Okay, let's talk a bit about cards and some other mechanics. First off, let's be really blunt, these cards will lead to some kind of monetization. Even if the devs claim it won't be pay to win, they've already stated that cards will be included with content packs, and have not guaranteed that all these cards will be available without buying the pack. All they've really promised is that they will add additional new cards when these packs are released that everyone will be able to get. And then there are supplies that you can earn to unlock more cards during the game, and I will be pleasantly surprised if there is not some way to buy these supplies for real cash somewhere down the line. This is the dev team that made Evolve, and Evolve had a lot of microtransactions, and maybe a lot is an understatement. Let's see if that was actually all 2K's doing. The other place I can see microtransactions coming up are for additional cosmetics for the characters, because some of the characters already look out of place in a zombie apocalypse, so I can imagine them doing some weird and wonderful costumes for some of the other characters, or maybe some sensible ones for the ones that look silly, but we'll talk about that later. Now, the cards themselves and how they work in the game, I really want them to be something that you would enjoy and that has a meaning. But other than feeling you have a nice deck or collecting them all, there doesn't seem to be a massive reward for having particular ones in your deck in the grand scheme of things. You always start with the top one in the deck, then you get to pick an additional one each round, and all the cards offer little bonuses, but nothing really carries over to other games. So what's the point? It just doesn't seem to add much to the game. It's just kind of there and you have to pick one. Then there are cards which add additional objectives or things you need to avoid each game, like more groups of crows or putting alarms on doors, or perhaps changing the environment in some way such as adding fog to limit your view distance. These cards at least change the gameplay a bit and thus serve more of a purpose, so actually I think these ones are quite good, but they're random, they're not something that you have in your deck and pick up. So really they could just be modifiers and not have the whole card mechanic there at all anyway. And speaking of mechanics and thinking about the crows that we've just mentioned in particular, how on earth does a group of crows alert a horde? I haven't even quite worked out what sets them off because they're always going off without warning. Is it some kind of hive mind and they're all connected to the ridden? I mean, it can't be the noise because I can tell you right now, 4 people firing automatic weapons are going to make a hell of a lot more noise than 10 crows squawking as they fly away. I know, I understand, it's supposed to be like car alarms in Left 4 Dead, but they have that in there with the car alarms. They also have alarms on some doors. I'm just not sure why they needed the crows. I mean, they even have a special in the game that wasn't in the beta, but it's called the Snitch, it's a screamer, it alerts the horde. Why not put that in the game instead of these stupid crows? Okay, let's move on and talk about the characters. You get to pick them. They each have a different bonus, and in one way it's a nice feature, and in another way it means you lack any attachment to them. In Left 4 Dead you become attached to the group of characters. They all had their own personalities, you followed them through their story. The characters in Back 4 Blood are plentiful, and trust me, they're going to be adding more, but they feel so generic as a result. And some of the things they are wearing make no sense at all. These characters are supposed to be cleaners. They're like a semi-military geared team going into infected zones. So why is Holly wearing ripped leggings, jean shorts and a jumper tied around her waist? You know, for any zombie to grab hold of. And then Carly, well, she looks like she's dressed to hit a rock or metal concert, not go into combat. And I'm not entirely sure how she's managed to stay so well showered and dressed in some kind of post-apocalypse situation. And then the same applies to Doc here. Why on earth would you still be wearing your long flappy white coat? Yeah, I get it, it signifies she's a doctor, but if you're in the medical profession at all, you'll know that we can wear like shell suits when we go out as first responders, which have doctor written on the back. Don't toddle about in a white coat in public. Now, in fairness, not all the characters look silly. Hoffman, Walker, Mom, and possibly Evangelo at least look dressed for some kind of action. Obviously the intention was to make these characters look good rather than make them feel realistic. And again, this is something that Left 4 Dead did so much better. Those were people caught up in something, still wearing all the clothes they had on at the time it kicked off. If they had changed, they'd change it into something sensible that was easy to move in. You know, they were normal people, and the people we have in Back 4 Blood are supposed to be these cleaners who are at least semi-trained, who have full military gear but apparently no body armor, showing off their midriffs and wearing long flowing items that can easily be grabbed by zombies. But that's okay, because if you look cool or badass, then the zombies aren't going to kill you, right? While we're on the topic of characters, I just want to make a quick note on movement. It's very fluid, jumping is smooth when getting up on top of objects. There's a few bugs here and there when getting knocked about by the specials, but it's mostly pretty solid. Combat mechanics are smooth, switching weapons, reloading, using items, etc., and all the animations are very good. But equally, I would expect nothing less from a $60 first-person shooter. Another area that Back 4 Blood is really lacking at the moment are sound cues. Not just for the specials, but even when the horde hits. Left 4 Dead had very specific music and sounds to alert you to events, but Back 4 Blood seems to completely lack this. And it really does take something away from the game. I mean, there was always a little bit of panic when you used to hear the hunter sound. Where was it? Where could it come from? Who is it targeting? Am I alone? Where's my team? Otherwise, the sounds are fine. The guns sound like guns, the ridden sound like zombies. Oh, other than the ones that scream racial slurs, which apparently is caused by two different growls playing over each other, I'm impressed that one made it into an almost open beta. So overall, the sounds are okay, they just aren't anything special, and the game is certainly missing something that Left 4 Dead had. Let's move on to our summary. The graphics are solid, it's an Unreal 4 game after all. But there's nothing exciting about them, the environments are so far very generic, the enemies are also very generic, and while there is loads and loads of blood, an excessive amount in fact, gore is at a minimum otherwise. The combat in essence is good, it's a shooter, but in the same way that every other shooter is a shooter. We've all used the same guns in plenty of other games, there's nothing new here, they're not doing anything special. And then the characters, they just don't matter, they're just kind of there, not all of them fit with the supposed aesthetic of the game. I don't care about them or what happens to them. Heck, I was not even certain who I was playing at times. I thought at one point my character had been switched because someone else had picked it in the game. And well, maybe it had, I'm honestly not sure. At best, the whole card system feels like a tacked on element to try and make the game deeper, and it just falls massively short at that. And at worst, it's an intentional attempt to monetize another part of the game other than just adding cosmetics. I mean, who needs to make engaging expansion content if we can just make people want to buy new cards to fill out their deck? Because gotta catch 'em all, right folks? Can I say that, or did Nintendo copyright it? Back 4 Blood is a first-person shooter, and it plays like one. We have had a lot of zombie-style horde mode games in the years since Left 4 Dead, and there are more coming up. Rainbow Six Extraction comes to mind. And that's another Ubisoft game that looks 100% like its trailer once you see the gameplay footage, right? I really had hoped Back 4 Blood was going to do something different, and well, it doesn't. It doesn't even live up to the Left 4 Dead games in gameplay, aesthetic, or story. For a spiritual successor to the Left 4 Dead games, it sure misses out a good chunk of what made them, for one thing, fun, and for another thing, just good challenging games that kept you going back and replaying the levels over and over. And don't get me wrong, I actually think Back 4 Blood would be enjoyable for a campaign playthrough with your friends, but probably only once. I just can't see myself wanting to play it over and over again. And at a price of $60 US, I'm not convinced it's worth that kind of money for what is on offer. Especially when we already know the content packs are coming, and there'll likely be microtransactions. Maybe something I would pick up in a sale in a year or two, perhaps? I won't score the game out of 5, it's still in beta, but I think my general views speak for themselves. And they are being echoed by a lot of people on YouTube and elsewhere. The open beta starts later this week, and I suggest you try it for yourself before you buy it. And please let me know down below in the comments what you think of the game. It's really interesting seeing the variety of views on this one. Thanks very much for watching, please hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon for some more game reviews.